Welcome to Minor Changes for a Major Impact, how to improve your higher ed website and increase applications from Silvertech. We are a digital agency that specializes in creating valuable digital experiences. Website and mobile development, digital marketing strategy, user experience design, Salesforce development and integration, marketing automation, application development, and managed services and hosting, all united by our lead to loyal approach. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. Up first, we're going to be discussing some digital trends we've been seeing in higher ed. We'll dive into the case against carousels and some other homepage shifts you can make. Let's discuss how to organize and optimize content. Then we will discuss information architecture, and we will close with getting to know your audience. Along the way, if you have any questions, shoot them along, and I will get to the Q&A portion at the end. I am your host, Ian Hughes. At Silvertech here, I am the content marketing strategist, the host of the Lead to Loyal podcast, and I write for the Silvertech blog. Silvertech's experts for today, I am joined by Sean Howe, is a digital strategist here at Silvertech. Our other Silvertech expert is Griffin LaFleur, Senior Account Manager.
We have a lot of great stuff to talk about today.
We do.
I know that it's a lot of the things that we hear from maybe even some individuals that are on this webinar, and certainly a number of the clients we work with and a number of the universities we talk to as we do a lot of research in this space. It's definitely an industry and a focus that we have here at Silvertech, which is why we're bringing this webinar here for you today.
Absolutely. Yep.
As I mentioned in the intro, Silvertech, we go beyond websites to create custom integrated digital solutions. Today, however, our focus is going to primarily be on the website end of things. So let's discuss some digital trends we've been seeing in higher ed. Sean, many unique audience types, faculty, students, prospects, alumni. You're hearing this a lot?
Yeah, so with the clients that I work with, I'm hearing this constantly. Websites, they're trying to be all things to all people. But what you really need to do is you need to focus in on who your core audience is for that website, who you're really going to be focused on. It's really hard to develop a strategy, content, information architecture, all of these things if you're trying to be all things to all people. So what we've started to see and what we've started to recommend is higher ed websites having more success when they're focusing on just one of those audiences, and usually that's prospective students. Griffin,
Mm-hmm.
have you found that as well?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the higher ed institutions that I work with, when I always ask, what's the goal of any of your digital campaigns, be it the website, be it any of the other supporting campaigns that they might operate, it's to really drive enrollment or increase enrollment. That's measured in a lot of different ways to them. It could be initial inquiries, it could be actually applying, or even just scheduling a visit to the school. And I think those are important when we're talking about the many different audience types, because it also reflects people being at different points in their decision-making process.
Yep.
And when we break out these audience types, it also can even go further down. So instead of trying to be everything to everybody, I think you want to create a unique experience for each of those people at different steps in the particular journey. And I think when we start talking about the ways that we're seeing some of the more successful schools doing it, they're leveraging technology, they're really focused on a lot of the data that they're capturing, because ultimately that's how they got to find out who their unique audience types are to begin with. So how can we really use that stuff? So I think it's very important to understand those aspects of how we're targeting prospective students, but then not neglecting the supporting cast of characters.
Yeah, and I was going to say
that
that's not to say that prospective students are the only audience you should be focusing on, because obviously faculty, current students, alumni, those are all really important things too. But when you're looking at your website strategy overall, usually the thing that's going to be driving the most traffic are those prospective students. So that should be the focus of your strategies overall.
Sure.
And knowing in that prospective student group too that there are subsets of audiences. Well, you've got your military, you've got your international students, and so
transfer students.
Yeah, a lot of different people, and that's something that we'll get into in this, is figuring out how do you segment those, how do you come up with personas for each of those, and how do you target each of them effectively.
Governance. Let's talk about this for a moment. A big thing in higher ed, because you have many different departments kind of touching that website. I think who owns and updates what on the website is a huge barrier.
I've seen, obviously every organization is broken up into different departments and groups. And I think it's more prevalent even in higher ed when we're talking about faculty and staff. marketing and admissions. All these different groups have different goals or expectations of what they might want to get out of their website. Everybody's fighting for real estate or fighting to put their own unique message on the site. And I think the most success you can have is really aligning who owns what in different areas of the site. So who can we really go to each time to talk about, this is really what we'd like, and then we always reflect back to the goal. How can whatever we do, be it from a user experience standpoint, a content standpoint, or an information architecture perspective, how can we account for a lot of different needs from different departments while still focusing on the overarching goal?
So yeah, that's a great point. And what I've ended up seeing a lot with the higher ed clients I work with is that a lot of times the colleges, the different programs, they'll have their own kind of pages that they're responsible for, and they end up being off-brand, they end up being different, they're using different templates than what the main website might be doing. So it ends up being kind of a different experience depending on where you go on the website, which can be really poor from a user experience perspective. So what we end up recommending a lot of the time is figure out, like you said, what that overall goal is, who's responsible for it, and make sure everyone understands what you're trying to do with the website and have everybody fall into line.
Yeah, I think the last note I'd have on this is if you can at least relay what we've just said, I think your next step is really getting buy-in and an organizational structure between everybody that we're all working towards the same thing.
Right.
And I'll use a marketing department or marketing or advancement department at a university and admissions. I think that they should and could be working so much more closely together, and we're always asking questions of our clients. How are you working with admissions? What are you responsible for to provide them in terms of a lead or a prospective student? And what are they responsible in providing information back to you? How do you assist each other in completing that customer life cycle from the first time they engage with your brand all the way through the time that they've applied and became a student?
I think just from my experience, this is one of the problems that people aren't really talking about or realizing until they dive into a redesign process.
A project like this,
Yeah.
Sure.
So speaking of a redesign process, I think we're also seeing many colleges and universities are opting for quick fixes, just kind of plastering over the homepage and not necessarily taking care of those program degree pages that are off-brand.
Yeah, if you want to talk about having different experiences, not only can that happen with governments, it can definitely happen in this instance as well, where I've seen this happen too, where a lot of people say, you know what, we're limited on time, we're limited on budget, let's fix the homepage and then we'll figure everything else out afterwards. And that could be great from an initial person landing on your homepage, but that can end up affecting the experience negatively once they start diving into the rest of the website. Because like I was saying before, the user experience becomes disjointed, it becomes harder to find things, feels like you're on a different website overall if you're opting for this quick fix approach.
Now look, I always am talking to clients and prospects and partners of ours about continuing to evolve your website, to analyze the data, what is that data saying, and let's make changes to optimize those things. And so taking advantage of low-hanging fruit, like we're minor changes to make a major impact here. I mean, I think that the opportunity exists to do quick fixes, but when you've not only had a very solid foundation, something that you've built with that is always going to be marching towards that goal, but doing it for the right reasons, making those changes not reactively, not on a whim.
Sure.
We're constantly making sure that we're looking for areas to improve, what work and what doesn't. But I think, to your point, we really don't want it to end there. We want to say, if we're going to make a change here and it's a change to the architecture, maybe it's a change to the way people navigate to a certain section of the site, I think that should be reflected in the deeper pages and have less of a band-aids or less of, as we're calling it here, quick fixes, and focus on it being an evolution and an optimize of the site instead of having to do a revolution and a full rebuild when you don't need to in the future.
That's a great point. And I think another thing to keep in mind is looking at your website holistically too, because people aren't just coming in on the homepage. They're coming in on your program pages. They're coming in on a lot of different places. So if you're only fixing your homepage, that's not going to have a benefit with all of the other pages that you're looking at. What I would recommend is taking a look at what your entry points are on the website. What are the most popular ones? How are people getting to your website? Through what traffic sources? and then taking a step back and saying, you know what, okay, it's not just the homepage, it's all these other pages we need to take into account as well.
This is a key takeaway here from Hanover Research. This is back in 2014, surveyed thousands of colleges and universities. And among the most important tools for social and online marketing is an effective and intuitive website, which should be considered the ultimate brand statement for an institution.
I really just want to pull one thing out of this takeaway, and I think it's the term intuitive website.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think you're right. Yeah.
To me, that's the most important. Well, not the most. I mean, I definitely think it's high on the priority of importance, partially because we don't want to confuse those visitors in terms of making it difficult to help them find what they're looking for. You know, we want to potentially even have them have the opportunity to self-identify who they are, or make it easy for them to locate a specific degree program or college, you know, be it online, be it on campus, things like that. So intuitive is extremely important in reducing the amount of times people are going to come to your site and be like, I just have to go. I have to go. I don't know what I'm looking for. I can't find it, and
Right.
and thus potentially leaving a negative brand statement, you know, for your college or university.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's dive into the case against carousels and some other homepage shifts. Some of the first of these improvements that I think you can make to your website.
And just because we talk about, we have a glossary of terms that we use here every day. I think that one thing that I hear, if we're going to talk about carousels, I think we can use it interchangeably with rotators or homepage sliders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those that may not have heard the term carousel, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Hero images or hero sections of your homepage that have traditionally been used as a rotating cycle. So that's what we're going to be talking about
Thank
here.
you.
Yep.
Before we dive right into the rotators, let's talk about an example that we really like here. This is Champlain College. And I think rather than trying to be all things to all people, they've obviously made the decision to make sure the site is recruitment oriented, which creates a clean and focused homepage. Sean, thoughts on this page?
Yeah, I really like this one. You know, they're doing a great thing with that sticky application tab on the left there that kind of stays with you as you scroll down the website, which is great. Like you said, they're being prospective student focused. They're
Yep.
not focusing on all the other audiences that they could be focusing on. And then one of the things that I really like too is they call out that they're the #1 most innovative school. A lot of times I see these claims on higher ed
Right.
websites, and the website doesn't seem to reflect how innovative they are or how cutting edge they are. This one in particular, I think, does a good job of that. And the website itself actually reflects that innovative tag that they were given.
And moving away from rotating images, I think that they've done a very good job of utilizing the scroll functionality of a website, or the scroll experience that users have. I mean, you can see right from this image. Now, I know that I really hope that you listeners have the opportunity to go visit this school's website and check it out and see what we're talking about in person. But you can see even right in the center of the screen, there's a downward pointing caret, and that shows the user that's on that page that they can scroll down. And what they did here on these pages is as opposed to using a rotator that flashes images really quickly across the screen, they've opted to use the scroll to tell the story and focus on different areas of, you know, what it's like to be a student at Champlain College and what areas are important. And you're right, Sean, having a sticky Find Your Program on the left-hand side,
Right.
that's a very unique experience for somebody as they continue to read the digestible and the right content that's in each of these, you know, sections, so to speak, so that they continue to move further down the intended funnel or a path to conversion through the IA or information architecture that Champlain College was laying out.
Definitely.
So let's move into the case against carousels. Moving user face elements usually reduce accessibility. So carousels, image rotators, they often scroll too fast for even the most literate web user. So imagine how carousels make low literacy users, seniors, or international users feel. And I think this last one is an important point. Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm talking to a lot of my higher ed clients, almost 100% of the time, they're always talking about how international students are their next big focus and how that's the next big audience that they need to be focused on. And if you're using carousels, for an audience who English might be their second language, that might be a hard thing for them to see what that message is and then click into that. You know, like this says too, it's even hard for literate web users.
Right.
You know, I don't ever click on the second or third rotator on a website. I'm sure many of the listeners don't either. So understanding that and knowing that, you know what, maybe it's not the best strategy to have 2, 3, 4 rotators on here. Maybe just having one solid call to action or one path or journey to go down is the better way to go.
Right.
Yeah, I think even several years ago when carousels and rotators were the norm, obviously we're in a changing industry, and it's no surprise to see that now that we've collected enough data, it shows otherwise. And we'll talk about data in just a second, but the studies back then were, how long in between changes do you have for the carousel? And everyone's like, oh, it's 3 seconds, it's 5, it's 8. Well, you run into a bunch of different problems in that regard. Is it could go too fast and you're showing too much content, which can be overwhelming, or it's going too slow and people might be moving off that page before they even see another call to action. And especially if you're using 3, 4, even different 5 calls to action, they're all promoting a different type of service. Again, you're trying to accommodate to a lot of different goals and users and internal governance of what they want.
I was going to say this goes back to that governance conversation, because everyone wants their homepage real estate, and the way to appease that is, you know what, we'll throw you a rotator, we'll throw you a big hero image you can put your stuff on, and that makes people happy internally, but for your external audience, who your website is really for, that doesn't make for a good experience for them.
Well, let's validate that this isn't just our opinion. I mean, let's talk about the data.
Yeah.
So here it is. This is a study. Now, this is Eric Runyon, developer over at Notre Dame. So this is a higher ed study of the effectiveness of rotators. So he ran this test from mid-October to January. And of a total of 28,928 clicks, the image rotated more than 315 times. 84% of the clicks were on position 1. And then you see position 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they split the rest of those clicks, less than 4%. So it's either you're clicking on the first one, or you're tuned out, or you've gone elsewhere before the next ones they're up there.
So to me, seeing this was shocking, because I knew rotators weren't effective. I didn't realize how ineffective they actually were. Right. And this really
the delta is way too big.
It's insane.
It's way too big. You would at least expect position 2 to have somewhat of a higher position 3, and so forth and so far further down. But I think what this shows us is that very few people were even staying through that rotator long enough, or not necessarily not finding the information. So they might have had a really great site, but misuse of a rotator in terms of intuitive design and people finding their stuff. They obviously moved away from this page fairly quickly.
Yeah, and there's some ways that you can easily kind of test this on your own site. Is you can set up some event tracking in your Google Analytics account. You can even just look at page path, user journey information in there as well, and you can start to get at least a rough idea of how people are clicking through on your website. And I think what a lot of the listeners will end up finding is similar to this, that people aren't really interacting.
And let's be honest, it's not that position 1 was the only good offer on this page. I'm sure that all intentions were good, that positions 2 through 5 had something good to say. Again, it really just reflects the ineffectiveness of this particular approach to your homepage or hero area.
Yeah, I'm sure if you took the messaging from position 5 and put that in position 1, you'd see similar results here.
Exactly, yes.
And not to be a fearmonger here, but I'm concerned that with the ADA website guidelines coming in 2018, that this might be seen as enough of a reduce in accessibility for Americans with disabilities.
That's a great point. And that's something else that I'm starting to see with a lot of higher ed clients that I work with too, is they're really starting to get concerned about ADA compliance and making improvements in that regard. So you're right. I mean, this could just be another thing you need to worry about in terms of being compliant.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up that point, Ian. I know we don't talk too much about it here in this webinar, but it is extremely important for anybody listening to start thinking about those types of things. I mean, we've seen cases already going into the higher education space where schools are being sued for not being ADA compliant. In any project that we're working on, again, even thinking of low-hanging fruit, this is a big significant shift in your site and should be something that you want to be talking about internally in terms of ADA. We have a really great blog post on our Silvertech Schoolhouse blog. If it doesn't get shared as a follow-up with this podcast, I strongly encourage someone just to go read it. And I apologize for the tangent on this, but Ian brought up a really good point.
Yeah, no, it just occurred to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, we've talked about how carousels probably aren't the best thing, but what are some of the solutions or alternatives to using that? Because I think a lot of people out there are like, okay, I get that they're bad, but what do I do? What do I do?
Right. I mean, I think the short answer is personalization. Griffin, if you could speak to what today's content management systems kind of offer there.
Yeah, I think as whoever owns or maintains the website, be it a webmaster at a school, be it a marketing department, they're in a real good spot today when it comes to the technology and what it can really do for us and allow for personalization. If we're talking about leveraging some enterprise type content management systems that have the ability to categorize different persona groups and understand in general buckets what types of content those people would consume, i.e. user requirements, we can have the opportunity through browsing behavior or through repeat visits to understand what types of content that they're really trying to consume. So while we may be focused on the initial visit on prospective students, we may find that a visitor coming to the website could be a transfer student that isn't in high school right now looking to make their decision, and they have different user requirements. They have different barriers of entry. They have a different ways that they make decision, and they consume different content because they may want to say, how do I get my transfer credits over here versus what's the beauty of being a first year student at XYZ college. So anyway, what I mean to say about this is really understanding who your visitors are and what types of content they're consuming, and allowing that hero space to be very dynamic in terms of presenting the right content to the right user at the right time, and making sure that we're capitalizing and capturing them at their certain part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that age-old cliche at this point of right content at the right time for the right person. It is a cliche, but it's also very true. And you also brought up personas. That's really the path you need to go down here in terms of setting up what that ideal path for them is, rather than having the rotators saying, okay, who are my users? What do they need? What are their goals, not your goals? Because being internally focused is not going to help you make the best website possible for that external audience.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'd comment even about the carousels is you don't have to think of it as a static image that you have to manually go in there and change. Again, I don't want to get too deep into the various types of technology that you can use, but trust me, it's out there in terms of being able to set up different pieces of content within the same space and having it dynamically represent. I think another thing when you're talking about personalization or dynamic content, we can have that static image on the page, but let's say on a refresh or a revisit to that page, you have the ability to cycle through those, again, and it could share the same messaging, but it could be a different image. And really the content personalization is when you've had the opportunity to collect data about those visitors and be smart marketers about how you talk to them.
Absolutely. And, we talk about carousels and rotators. That doesn't mean you have to have absolutely static content at all times. I think we saw with that Champlain example is they had different images in the background changing to show different examples of the campus, but that main message remained the same. So it's all about just figuring out what that ideal path is, and you can kind of tinker with the background as much as you want. So.
Absolutely. Here are some minor changes if you do have to use carousel. Something you could do in the meantime, I think, to help with some of those numbers. This is from interface design expert Brad Frost. Cycle through like items. So that Notre Dame, if those weren't if they were 5 different items that they're cycling through there, keep them consistent. Maybe it's all 5 or 4 prospective students. Make navigation obvious. Don't hide buttons that enable you to navigate back and forth. Have that in place.
Yeah, in between carousels. I even like those that have maybe an indicator of how many things you can scroll through and give them the arrows and the options. And especially now with mobile devices, they have the ability to swipe if they so choose, but we're not changing that message or changing the intent of what you want to use that space for, because now we're just potentially confusing them.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys can attest, there's nothing more frustrating than when you get to a website and it's rotating and you're on like the 4th one, and how many are there? How many more will there be?
And what was the second one that I saw?
Yeah, what was that? I can't go back. It's the worst. Yeah.
Key takeaway then, international users also read more slowly. If your site is not in their native language and thus won't be able to understand a panel if it's displayed only briefly. And this is from Dr. Jacob Nielsen from the Nielsen-Norman Group. So back to Sean's point there about the international students. I mean, they're coming to your sites, they're checking out, and
and
make it accessible.
And again, this goes back to what your website goals are, who your audience is, what personas do you have. If international students are a persona that you've developed and you know that they're going to be an important demographic that's coming to your website, you need to account for that. You need to understand that, and I think this backs that up nicely.
Let's talk a little bit about how to organize and optimize content. Another example here, this one we really like. This is a program page over at Clemson University for their landscape architecture degree. One of the challenges that universities face is that individual colleges and programs want to have control over the web presence, which frequently results in a disjointed and confusing experience for visitors. And I think Clemson do a good job of avoiding this challenge. Sean, thoughts here, Griffin?
Actually, yeah, before Sean, this is really Sean's area. I know that he spends a lot of time looking at engagement on certain pages and how people are getting there. One of the things that I like about this, and Sean had mentioned it earlier, is that Clemson did a good job of reducing the disjointed experience or confusion. What they did, essentially, user experience design and the strategy that went into what types of content they wanted to put on the page, they created a very flexible template that they can repurpose across all different degree programs and really customize the layout of that content or the imagery that they're using so that when a visitor's on that page, they know why they're there. They know what types of information they were going to have. And what I liked mostly about this is they treated this as an intersection of their website, meaning that when you open the menu in the top right of this page, it's the hamburger menu. When you open that, it's specific to this area of focus, this program of focus, and it talks about even similar programs that others are interested in, but it also shows you the other sections you can go within. And so I thought, not only from a flexible template perspective, but also the way they've decided to lay it out and make this a separate section of the website that doesn't provide a disjointed experience was very well done.
Yep.
And that's the extent of what I can really talk about.
No,
here,
absolutely. That's a great point. And I think the other thing that they did a really good job of was from a content perspective. So when we're talking about program pages and degree programs, that's where a lot of the clients that I work with end up getting hung up on. They don't really know the best way to frame it. They don't really know what to put on there. And listeners, you can't see it right now, but if you do go to this website, you can see the rest of the content that they have on the page, and it's really easily digestible. It's easy to read. There's bullet points on there. They also have outcomes of this particular degree.
Yeah, you're right.
What types of careers you can get, and they really start to tell a story of what getting a landscape architecture degree can do for you. So I think that's what a lot of these program pages are starting to go towards, is more of that storytelling, and really giving the visitors an idea of what that overall experience is going to be.
Let's talk for a moment just some minor changes here that you could make to organize your content. Just use headings and subheadings to take to your full advantage. It's helpful for scannability, as Sean mentioned, and also has SEO benefits. Make appropriate words bold, use hyperlinks for the right words, create bulleted lists, write short to the point paragraphs, convey complex information with infographics or images. And I'll flip over to, again, further down here on the page, the Clemson page is the landscape architecture. You see they've digestible, there's bullet points. Thoughts, Griffin?
Yeah, so Sean talked a little bit about what else you might see on this page, and just due to the screenshot and the size of the screen area that we have, is when envision this to the left of this are where those results are. And I like that you mentioned the results, partially because be it an incoming student or being a parent of those students, that's extremely important, especially if you know at that opportunity what types of degree program you might like to go into. But I also like the layout of this page. It's short, it's to the point. There's some calls to actions in terms of people digging deeper, looking at the curriculum or course description so that they can learn a little bit more about what they could potentially learn. But I also like the use of infographics, not seen on this page, but still, again, looking to use any pieces of content to help better tell a story. That's going to be extremely important on pages like this or other. And the last thing I'll say is, you may not notice this, but that landscape architecture BLA degree program, that's a sticky header that's followed a
Ah,
user
that's
that
right.
scrolled
That's
down the
right.
page. So it still allows you to access the menu from there. I think we alternatively see people with a return to top of page.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of different points, but we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're keeping someone engaged and ready to move to the next click point on a conversion path.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the other stuff that we're starting to see are sticky conversion points with an apply
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
or request
Yeah,
more
back to
information.
Champlain. Yeah, thank you.
Very similar to what they're doing here. So that's starting to be a trend. What I like about this page is kind of the more digestible text areas that they have. And on the rest of this page, it's more of, like I said, they're showing outcomes, they're showing careers. But, we all know this. People coming to the website, they don't want to read a bunch of text.
Nope.
So having it in digestible chunks is going to be really, really helpful. Also, the target audience for a lot of these degrees, they're doing a lot of research. They're going to a lot of different websites.
Sure.
They don't necessarily have the time to read in detail all of the stuff that you're having on your pages. So, the simpler the better in these cases. And also cutting down on some of that academic language that might be used
true.
is another thing that we've seen a lot of. Is that's not necessarily how your students are speaking or thinking. So putting yourself in their shoes and once again being aware of what that external audience is looking for is going to be very beneficial for these pages.
We'll talk a few more minor changes you can make here, some tips. These are from you, Sean, so how to optimize content. You mentioned that you see this, you're surprised in a lot of SEO audits that you do that quality titles and meta descriptions, people we're not paying attention to these.
Yeah, this is something that I see a lot of. I've done a lot of SEO audits for a lot of different clients, and this isn't even just a higher ed problem. This is kind of an across the board problem. People are ignoring the metadata. Now, when we're talking about meta descriptions, that's that area underneath your search result link there, and that's basically giving an overall description or summary of what that page is about. Usually you want to keep that to it's about 155, 156 characters to make sure it fits into that area. But really that's helping for click-through rates when people are actually getting to a search engine results page. What can actually have a really big boost to your kind of your SEO juice in general is that top meta title right there. And you can see in the slide, it's the Schoolhouse blog Silvertech. So usually what you want to try and have there is your brand. So Silvertech or whatever your university name might be. Kind of a detail about what that page is, and then sometimes maybe a secondary detail as well.
Right.
So a lot of times, like you said, Ian, I'm seeing people kind of just ignore this. It's a really easy win in terms of SEO that you can do. It doesn't take that long. And just implementing that can end up having a pretty big effect.
Tip number 2, improve your page load speed. How important is this?
Yeah, this is another one that I see when I'm doing these SEO audits as well. Again, it's a simple test that you can do. You can just go to Google Page Speed Insights, put your URL in there, and it's going to spit back some stats about not only your desktop speed, but your mobile speed as well.
Yep.
So, and it's also going to give you some information about what your mobile user experience is like. So Google has started to penalize people who don't have a mobile-friendly website. So it's really important to make sure that is taken care of. But also, just general page speed, there's some easy technical things in terms of caching that you can do that can end up making your page load speeds improve quite a bit. And page speed is another one that Google's looking pretty closely at now. And if you're not providing a good experience in terms of page speed, they're going to ding you on SEO, and you're not going to rank as highly.
And just to follow up in terms of, I noticed, I know I mentioned earlier that we use a lot of industry terminology, and we just made a recommendation to reduce higher ed terminology. So for those that do have questions about any of these types of things that we're talking about, obviously we'd love the opportunity to speak and kind of go deeper into what that means, because even when it comes to improving your page load speed, not only are the things you can do from how you organize your content and how you upload images and store those in your site or on your server, but there's other changes you can make from an engineering standpoint, of which we're really not covering here. But if that's something you feel that you're hearing internally, wow, this site's running really slow, I'd say let's have a conversation and really focus on what those pain points are and how we can find those quick fixes and low-hanging fruit to address them.
Definitely.
Tip number 3, Sean, This, I think, back to the cliche, provide useful and relevant content.
Yeah, this is one we've been hearing for years now, useful and relevant content. But what does that really mean? And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with the personas and knowing your audience. It needs to be useful and relevant to them. So,
right.
Like I said, putting yourself in their shoes, understanding what they want, what they're looking for, that's really the thing that's going to help drive more engagement and therefore better SEO.
Another example here that we really like, I'd like to pause for a moment. This is Duke Health. While many academic medicine hospitals struggle with how to present themselves as healthcare providers to the public, as well as promote their education and research elements, Duke simplifies their site and focuses on one audience, patients. And I think this touches on a lot of what we were just talking about. It's this knowing your audience and providing that focus.
They've reduced the clutter. They've reduced the confusion. Mm-hmm. I mean, while they probably have secondary and tertiary audiences that would potentially be addressed in this website, I mean, they're putting a lot of the focus into that primary audience and giving them the opportunity to find the information with simple calls to action, really clean and straightforward navigation. Yep. And all the content and messaging is strictly driven towards validating them as the healthcare facility of choice for a lot of these patients that would want to visit there.
I love this website because what they're doing is they're splitting you off into the audience that you are right away. Yeah. So they have that first find your doctor. So if you're looking for a doctor, boom, there you go. Yep. Right off the bat, you're good. Then if you go down a little bit, you can access your chart if you're already a current patient, or if you're a doctor or researcher, you have this other path to go down. So I think they're doing a really great job of doing what we've been talking about throughout this webinar, is understanding the journey, understanding the audience, and funneling them into their individual paths.
Yeah, I'd like the listeners to take note of what you had just said, because I know in a few slides here we do talk about something really cool that allows you to capture some of that information. Because I know you at this point you might be saying, really, how do I know when someone visits my site how they fit into a particular persona segment? So make note of what Sean had just mentioned in terms of how you allow other people to access that, because I think you'll find some really interesting information later on here.
Yeah, you can guide them yourself with the calls to action and the content that you're putting on. Yep. You can start to get a better understanding of how people are interacting that way. So if you have, like Duke has, 3 separate things here, you can start to understand what that division of audience is.
Right. Key takeaway: colleges and universities, they want a quick fix to improve SEO, but it doesn't really work that way. Even if you implement these tips, you will still need to monitor their progress and go back to make changes if something isn't working. The important thing to keep in mind is that improving SEO is a process, takes time, and if you stick with it, you'll start to see some positive results.
I think this is a really, really important takeaway here when we're talking about SEO. Griffin, you and I both.
We talk about this a lot.
We talk to a lot of clients and really try and get them to understand that, look, SEO, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard. That's the reality. It takes a long time.
Right.
You're not going to make one change on your website. You're not going to make the titles or meta descriptions changes that we just mentioned, and you're going to rank first on Google in a week. It's not going to happen. It takes months, it takes constant optimization, takes constant work, and then you'll start to see some incremental changes.
Yep.
Yeah, and let's just also make the distinction that when we're talking about SEO specifically, is that's organic search. That's how people are finding you in general search terms. So to carry on what Sean just said, I mean, it takes time because you make these changes. And let's think about all the websites in the world that Google has to index and how many visitors visit that site and all the other things that take into account in terms how search engines, and we use Google as our general search engine for the conversation, how they're going to index and find you. So I think SEO is not something to ever forget. You always follow best practices, you continue to monitor and optimize it, but it is one piece of the overall pie, so to speak, in terms of how people find you. It's a diversification of your efforts and your portfolio in terms of where your focus is. And I, again, just, it should never be forgotten, but it should never be viewed as something that's going to make changes overnight.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's talk for a little bit about information architecture,
which also can impact SEO.
It absolutely can. Yep.
Here's an example we really like. Local one here, my alma mater, Southern New Hampshire University. With clearly defined paths for each of its unique audiences, Southern New Hampshire University site is organized with precision. Every user journey has been mapped and well thought out, and conversion points are easy to find. I think the user always feels in control. new site.
Yeah, what I really like about Southern New Hampshire University's site here is that they have really strong calls to action right at the top there. They get the request info, apply now, visit SNHU. It doesn't get more clear than that,
Right.
and those are always right there at the top of the page. The other thing that I really like that they're doing is they've done a good job of splitting up online degrees and campus degrees into two separate paths. So what we're starting to see a lot of with higher ed in general are universities and colleges who are offering both that on-campus degree
Yep.
and they're diving into that online world as well. So what we've seen is people that or organizations don't really know how to label those or how to organize those on a website. Southern New Hampshire's done a great job of clearly putting those two as their own paths. And then if the listeners go onto this website and they check it out, they can actually see that you can dive into either the actual program subjects, or you can search by bachelor's, master's, or associates as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're really keen about outside of just being able to easily find your program and identify, where you want to go through the site. But I think Southern New Hampshire University also really does have good program pages, like we saw at Clemson.
Yeah. It has that consistency.
Consistency, much different layout than what we saw with Clemson, but certainly a consistent experience and appeals to the internal requirements that I'm sure that they face as well, and then making it easy for the end user to find that information and feel really connected. This site appears to be very conversion focused, and I'm sure that that's something that they're measuring all the time.
Yeah. And Sean, you had mentioned this, the request info, apply now, visit SNHU, the main conversion points. I don't think there's any right answer as to where exactly you should have your main conversion points, but you should have them that they're accessible.
You're absolutely right. There's no right or wrong. Well, there's wrong. There can be some wrong.
Hidden 10
there can be
pages
some
deep.
wrong.
Yeah,
But there are
different websites.
hidden and buried.
There can be wrong ones. But you're right that there is no quote unquote right answer for this. I think what they're doing here in terms of always having it fixed in the header is one of the best options that you can do. Absolutely.
Sure.
Let's talk about getting to know your audience. We've been touching on this. I think this is the central theme to all of the changes we've kind of been suggesting here is knowing and understanding who's coming to your website. This is an example here of a university that is doing some real interesting things here to get to know their audience. Griffin, you want to jump right in on this one?
And this is what I was talking about earlier in terms of making note about what Sean had said a few slides ago is allowing a user to, you can create a path for a user. I think that's what we saw with Duke in terms of providing different options. Yep. What Northeastern's doing right here is they're allowing users to self-identify. This personally is one of my favorite ways to capture information about a visitor, and they're doing it uniquely in a couple different ways here. They're allowing you to self-identify by which describes you, and then they're using that with data that they've already collected to say you're like X% of our students here, so that not only do you feel more like the other students that go there, and there's that connection to the school, which is really important, but the great thing about that is that they're using that information to now drive the rest of your experience on the site. I call it, self-identifying or providing a poll or a survey to someone. It's fairly subtle. I think it's interactive and people will engage with it. But what's really happening is they're using a personalization and a lead generation strategy to shape the user experience of this individual when they offer that information.
And the user is gaining buy-in as that percent goes and increases.
Absolutely,
it's like,
more
value. This is the journey
Yep.
for me.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, Sean? On
Yeah, I think Griffin summed it up nicely. I think what they're doing in terms of understanding who the visitor is in a subtle way, while not making that obvious, is really, really good.
I mean, and before you can do all this, I think the important groundwork is not only in the digital strategy about how you present this personalization effort, but really how do you identify who your personas are?
Right.
Yep.
So what is a persona?
There you go. Great transition, Griffin. Wow.
A persona is a fictional character that represents your typical website visitor. Personas help you identify needs, motivations, pain points, expectations, and goals, and they help put a human face to abstract customer data. One of the other things, and I think you touched on this, Sean, is they avoid that self-referential design or creating that content that you think
Right.
that the user wants.
Right.
You know, you put yourself in the shoes of these personas that you create.
Yeah, this really helps you step out of that intrinsic focused thing that a lot of people do, and you start to ask, okay, what is the ideal content, or what is the ideal experience for this particular segment or this particular target, and it really starts to paint a picture of what your website's going to start to look like from a content perspective, from an information architecture perspective, because like you said, it's all about what they need and what they want and what their ideal experience is.
Personas are key to creating a good user experience. Let's talk about user experience for a moment. User experience focuses on having a deep understanding of users, what they need, what they value, their abilities, and also their limitations. Sean, this is your line from a blog post you wrote. It isn't enough to just have a website anymore. The experience needs to be immediately valuable and relevant to visitors, or they will leave and find one that is.
That's exactly right. They're gonna find another university that does provide that good experience. I mean, the target audience for a lot of these higher ed websites now, they're younger people. You
Right.
know, it's that 16 to 20-year-old range of people. They're digital natives. They are always online. They're always on their phones. If the experience isn't good, they're going to be out of there. So user experience is absolutely paramount.
And it's not user experience, just user experience. And I'd say it's just, it isn't just enough to have a website anymore, even with a good user experience. It's providing a personalized experience. Because you said
context,
it's
too.
context.
Yep.
Yeah, that's more what
Yep.
I mean. Context. Thank you. Because they are, digital natives. They are in this area, and when they visit their favorite app, or when they go log into Amazon, or when they engage in any type of way with the web, more often than not, they're getting a hi Sean, a hi Griffin, or welcome back, or
Right.
here's some
they're used
recent
to these
searches.
experiences. Yep.
Even taking it outside of the web experience, even for other people engaged with visiting your website or in other industries as well. I mean, it used to be in retail. When you'd go to your favorite high-end store, you were more likely to buy from that high-end store because they remembered who you were, and they had they provided you with a personalized experience, or whatever it might be. And it's still present today in so many different areas, but I think we're seeing that we have a lot more control over it in a digital asset than we did a few years back.
And this is going to end up impacting your SEO and some of the other things that we talked about too. If you don't have that good user experience and people aren't sticking around on your website, they're going to bounce, they're going to leave, and that's going to end up negatively impacting your SEO, because Google's going to look at that and they're going to say, well, your bounce rate's pretty high right now. It doesn't look like the content you have on your website's very relevant,
Right.
so
It's
we're not
meeting
going to
those
rank you
users.
as highly.
Yep. Personas don't ever have to be done. Continue to tweak and iterate upon them, as much as necessary. So, if you notice that your audience is evolving, if your student, maybe you're shifting more, maybe you're targeting more a military demographic, overseas, international students, keep revisiting.
I think that any effort you do should be continually looked at over time. It should continue to evolve. We talked a lot about data. Data should always support any changes that you make. Now, there's a certain amount of information that you can assume about your personas based on, quite honestly, in certain higher educations, 100 years of collective student knowledge that have come through, the types of students that have visited your hall. But that is only just an assumption that you can make, which I think this is a good point. Don't just imagine your users as people who you think they are. Interviewing the real people is really where you're going to get the most value. Focus groups of existing students. Focus groups of people that you would potentially consider in your prospective student pool. Getting ahead of that and really understanding who those people are allows you to create, we say personas are putting a real face to the visitors of your website. We're taking real to a real spot, I think, at that point.
Another great option is user testing. Get a group of people who are roughly your target demographic, run them through the website, and see how they interact with it. See what they say about it.
Right.
And that's going to give you some great insight into how you could tweak those personas, how you could tweak your website. And I think this is a great point. Personas are not a static document. That's absolutely right. They should be growing as your business grows and changes as well.
Yep.
Like you said, if you have a different audience that you're going to be focusing on, your personas should also change to reflect
Right.
that.
I don't think that testing and research should ever take a backseat because it's the perceived, you're not getting immediate value or results from that. You're not getting something that you can implement overnight. I always think that not only from a validation standpoint, but the research and testing that you can do can help you in that evolution of your website. And how do you optimize, user test at launch and then user test a year later,
Right.
Absolutely.
If those of you that find a lot of value in your website as being the main validation tool and driver to your enrollment, I mean, let's take some of those things seriously and really see and measure. It's a great opportunity, and we all know senior leadership loves looking at data and numbers.
Love the numbers.
They love the numbers,
Yep.
and let's show them some good numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's an example. This is the last one we'll touch on, and I think this one is clear. University of Washington, that it is a persona-based website. This is just a beautiful example of a map, a campus map, and it's just maybe one of those elements you don't necessarily think of as being kind of vital to the experience of your website. This one's clean, color-coded, easy to use. Thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, I think this does a good job of integrating a lot of the things that we've talked about before. One of them is user experience wise. This is basically using some Google Maps functionality, but it's putting it onto their own branded map. Also, it's taking into account the personas that they have. It might not be prospective students, although it could be, but this could be something that's really useful for a current student who might want to figure out, hey, where am I going next? Or like, where's this particular building? So I think it does a good job of talking about a lot of the things that, or doing a lot of the things that we've talked about already.
And those of you that aren't able to see this from the static image is it's a very interactive map. I mean, you can click into these areas, you can access information about them, you can filter different things out. So when we're talking about that particular on-premise user or existing student or faculty, this doesn't appear to be a very small campus in my opinion. I mean, there's certainly enough to get, or enough opportunity for, especially for first year students, to get a little lost. Let's make it really easy for them to find places of interest for them. It promotes, a bigger sense of community for those on campus. And when we talk about students going to college, this is a big coming of age experience. And if you're focusing on that persona, you're really making it easier for them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
agreed. Yeah. Key takeaway here. A persona-based website can see a 200% increase in website traffic, 97% increase in website-generated leads, 124% increase in website-generated sales.
I think that kind of just sums it up right
Yeah,
there.
that's great.
Those are overwhelming stats, and I think if people start to integrate some of these personas into their strategies, they can see similar gains as well.
Nice. And we do have a buyer persona template that we will send out after the webinar here, how to create personas. Just a guide that you can use to get started if in fact you're not using them, but something to compare against maybe the template that you might be using yourself now. Our audience is finding it to be a good and useful tool. And I think that wraps up our webinar for today. So in conclusion, I think you got to make sure your main conversion points are easy to find. Avoid carousels or image rotators if you can. Write and organize your content for your readers, but with an eye for what search engines are looking for. And use personas for not just your website, but really any integrated marketing campaign. Anything you would like to add, Sean, Griffin, before we tune out here?
I think that about sums it up.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic webinar. Obviously Sean and I and Ian have had the opportunity to speak at length about this, and we're very pleased with the chance to share it with everybody that's attended today. I hope you see a lot of value in it. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. I know Ian, as the moderator, will be happy to answer any and all questions that he can. But also at the same time, certainly don't forget to reach out to any of us here at SilverTech if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or concerns, or you want to learn a little bit more about some of the efforts we're doing here. We do this because we want to continue to meet and engage with similar and like-minded individuals in an industry that we work a lot in. So again, thanks for coming, and very excited to hear more from you in the future.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Griffin. Thank you, Sean.